Hello and welcome to the channel. This is part number 3 of the Italian unification story. Now this story is indeed a process. Yes, it is a bloody process with a lot of loss of life and towns being destroyed between foreign powers at war with each other. But without this process, there would be no Italy. For example, if you visited the south of Italy, you may have to speak French. If you visited the north of Italy, you may have to speak German. Now, if you haven't done so yet, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It makes an enormous difference. You can also hit that like button while you're there. Leave me a comment, let me know what you want to watch in the future, and you can hit that notification bell so you know when my next video is going to come out. Now, this is the final part of the Italian unification story. If you haven't watched part number 1 and 2 yet, go do that first. It is in the description down below with a nice little link. Now, let's get into it. We left off with the Piedmontese Sardinians being on the up, which meant that the Italians were really on the up. They had the French backing, and it sealed a Franco-Sardinian victory over Austria, which led to the creation of a new state, the United Provinces of Central Italy, which would boast the Italian numbers. The Italians may have been on the up, but the French were actually concerned that the powerhouse of Prussia would join in the fight. As one famous politician said, most states have an army, but the Prussian army has a state. Anyway, the French actually organized an armistice with Austria behind the back of Cavour and Vittorio Emanuele II, which meant that the Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia would get Lombardy, but France would take the region of Savoy, where the Savoy family comes from, and they would take Garibaldi's home city, Nice. This was seen by Count Cavour as an absolute betrayal, and he resigned his position as the Prime Minister of Piedmont Sardinia immediately. Italy was a hostile environment at the time, and the newest Italian state of the United Provinces of Central Italy had some more uprisings, and they went to Vittorio Emanuele II and asked him if they could join in his kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia. When this happened, Count Cavour was persuaded by his king to come back and be the prime minister, and here we can see Piedmont Sardinia gaining most of northern Italy, but the Austrians still held the jewel of northern Italy, Venice. When Piedmont Sardinia took the land from the United Provinces of Central Italy, they also went and annexed a little bit of land from the Papal States, which meant that the French weren't happy because technically the Papal States were under their rulership. And Austria wasn't happy because they had lost Lombardia. And the Piedmontese weren't happy because they still wanted Venice. So no one was happy. By 1860, Garibaldi had since left Mazzini's Young Italy movement to join the royalist side. By April 1860, there was uprisings in Messina and Palermo on the island of Sicily in the south of Italy, and this was part, obviously, of the French Bourbon kingdom of the two Sicilies. The Piedmontese told Garibaldi that he has the freedom to muster up a group of volunteers and lead them into battle on the Sicilian island. This, of course, is the formation of the famed Red Shirts, also known as I Mille, the 1,000, who conquered the island against the Bourbon forces on the 15th of May, and Garibaldi declared himself the dictator of Sicily in the name of Vittorio Emanuele II. Vittorio Emanuele II and Count Cavour were happy with this because obviously they had new territory, but they didn't want to stretch their supply line too far afield, and they told Garibaldi to hold his position, and Garibaldi said, heck nope, I'm gonna do what I want. And in a defiant act, he marched his army of 24,000 volunteers into the southern states of Italy, and they were quite happy to see him. Vittorio Emanuele II and Count Cavour kind of realized it was now or never, and they marched their army down into the Papal States and quickly marched towards the Papal forces, winning at the Battle of Castelfidardo, which would see the Piedmont Sardinian forces claim victory on the 18th of September 1860, annexing the Papal States, except for Rome, because they didn't want to have a war with France, because they knew they couldn't win against France. They also didn't take the tiny state of San Mirano, because Garibaldi fled there in 1849, and it was agreed that this tiny state would never be incorporated into a larger Italian country, and it still holds its independence today. In the meanwhile, Giuseppe Garibaldi and his men marched to the stronghold of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, their capital city, Naples, Napoli, and he eventually arrived there on the 7th of September and chased down the Bourbon army, and they met at the Battle of Volturno on the 30th of September 1860, which ended up being a victory for the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. But the Piedmont-Sardinian army arrived to bolster the forces of Garibaldi, and they met at a battle once again, even in the presence of the Bourbon king, Francis II, the King of the Two Sicilies, who fought back valiantly. It ultimately ended in Garibaldi Piedmontese Sardinian victory on the 1st of October 1860. By the 26th of October 1860, Garibaldi and Vittorio Emanuele II met on a bridge in Teano, and Garibaldi handed over his rulership over the lands to Vittorio Emanuele II, which signifies the unification of the south and the north of Italy. Now this says a lot about Garibaldi's character, because he wanted a republic and he wasn't too keen on kings, but he set all his thoughts aside so that Italy could be united. Vittorio Emanuele II decided he didn't want to enforce his rulership over the southern kingdom of the Two Sicilies, and he held a vote to let the people decide if they wanted the Savoy kings or the Bourbon kings. Vittorio Emanuele II won the vote 99.85% to 0.15%, and with that the kingdom of the Two Sicilies faded into the history books, as Vittorio Emanuele II was proclaimed king of a unified Italy on the 17th of March 1861. Now, I say unified Italy, but they didn't hold Rome and they didn't hold Venice. For the next 4 years, however, there was unrest in the south of Italy, who revolted again and again, and even the now celebrity Garibaldi joined the revolutionary forces against the government he helped to form. Now, thankfully, these revolutions weren't too successful, but why were they happening? The south of Italy wasn't as rich as the north, and they couldn't keep up with their taxes, and they couldn't keep up with the industrialization of the world, which meant that they were getting left behind as they were underdeveloped compared to the north of Italy. And this issue is still evident in Italy today. After making his capital Turin, Vittorio Emanuele II allied the Italian forces with France and Prussia in 1866, while they fought the Austrians in what is known as the Brothers' War. This also led to the Third War of Independence for the Italians, in an attempt to get Prussia to back Italy so they could annex Venice and take it away from the Austrians and give it to the Italians. And along with Garibaldi, Vittorio Emanuele set out to fight his old foe, Austria. There were, of course, 8 battles that took place in the Third War of Independence, including 2 naval battles. The first battle being that of Custoza, which was the biggest of the war. 124,000 Italians versus 74,000 Austrians. But it saw the Austrians clinch victory, which is pretty much what happened for the rest of the war, except for the final 2 battles. The Italians performed poorly, but the Prussian and French forces performed really well, and they beat the Austrians. So Prussia annexed Venice and then gave it to France. But France realized they didn't want to share a border with Austria, and so they gave it to Italy. But still, Italy wasn't complete. Rome was still not a part of Italy yet. Rome was still under the French protection as the last stronghold of the Papal States, and the Italians would need something to happen so they could use it as a distraction. And this is exactly what happened in 1870. Louis Napoleon III, the French emperor, was turning out to be a really good military leader, and he became sort of a throwback to his uncle, the Napoleon, and he started to butt his head against the strongest army of the day, Prussia, which was led by Wilhelm I, and they started the Franco-Prussian War on the 19th of July 1870, which would go on to see the French Empire fall altogether and turn into a republic, and unify Germany as a nation. It also might be quite a good idea to do a video on this in the future. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Anyway, what did this mean for our Italians? Well, the French had a large number of its army in Rome to protect the Papal States. So they withdrew these forces, which meant that it was relatively easy pickings for the Italians. Vittorio Emanuele II sent the Pope a diplomatic mission telling him that he would give him diplomatic freedom as a sovereign, and he would retain his rights to be the pontiff of Christendom. The Pope called Vittorio Emanuele II's diplomats vipers, and Vittorio Emanuele II wouldn't dare set a foot in Rome. Italy had no choice. If they wanted a unified nation, they would need to take Rome. And under the leadership of General Cadorna, the Italians slowly made their way to Rome, giving the Pope time to reassess what was happening. Eventually, they captured the city on the 20th of September 1870 with 50,000 Italian troops. And Pope Pius IX sent out 13,000 troops and quickly realized he had no chance and surrendered. Here we may have seen the end of the papacy in Rome, but Vittorio Emanuele II was a staunch Catholic and he wanted to protect the Pope. He offered him a yearly allowance and a number of diplomatic concessions, but the Pope refused them all. However, Vittorio Emanuele II told the Pope that no matter what, the unification of Italy was happening with him or without him. And the next year, in 1871, he made Rome the capital city of Italy, ending the Risorgimento and sealing the Italian unification. Now, you may ask here, what about the Vatican City? When did that happen? Well, the popes didn't recognize the king's right to rule over Rome, and they refused to leave the Vatican compound. The Savoy family were all staunch Catholics and hated this idea. They wanted the Pope to be in Italy and in Rome, and they wanted to protect the papacy. And finally, this dispute was solved with Vittorio Emanuele II's grandson, Vittorio Emanuele III, and Pope Pius XII with the Lateran Treaty, which saw the birth of the Vatican City on the 11th of February 1929, which secured a new nation and very close ties between the Savoy family and the papacy. Thus ends the birth of a nation. Without the process, there would be no Italy, but there would always be Italians. I really hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you want to watch in the future by commenting down below. Like, comment, subscribe. The more you know.